common sight on Australian trails, the Merida e-One-Sixty is undoubtedly one of the most popular e-mountain bikes on the market. It's been completely overhauled for this year, featuring a brand new frame and suspension design that's been carried over from the e-One-Sixty enduro bike. Given how much we enjoyed riding the previous version, we were keen to see how all the changes would play out on the trail and whether the new e-One-Sixty would still be one of the best e-bikes out there. The new e-One-Sixty is Merida's biggest and burliest e-bike yet. Compared to the previous version, it's had an increase in travel. We now have 170mm travel fork and 174mm of rear travel. It's still equipped with a mullet setup, though thanks to the addition of a flip chip in the linkage, the back end can now accommodate a 29-inch wheel. The e-One-Sixty frame is manufactured in carbon and alloy versions, both of which are built around the latest Shimano EP8 motor. The carbon frames get a 600 watt-hour battery that's bolted inside the fully enclosed down tube, while the alloy frames get a bigger 750 watt-hour battery that's designed to be easily removable for separate charging. Regardless of frame material, every model is compatible with Merida's new 360 watt-hour range extender battery. In terms of geometry, the new e-One-Sixty is pretty close to its non-motorized sibling. We've got a 64.4 degree head angle, a 78.5 degree effective seat tube angle, a 459mm reach on our mid-size test bike, and every size comes with the same 446mm rear center length. There are no fewer than 8 models in the Merida e-One-Sixty lineup for this year, and prices kick off at $6,500 Australian dollars. Our test bike sits right at the opposite end of the spectrum, being the premium e-One-Sixty 10K. Now, with a retail price of 16 grand, this is the most expensive e-mountain bike that Merida has ever produced. That said, its spec compares favourably to other high-end e-bikes around this price point. We've got Fox Factory series suspension with a 38 Grip 2 fork and a Float X2 shock. There's a SRAM XX wireless transmission, Code Ultimate brakes, a DT Swiss HX 1501 carbon wheel set and Maxxis tyres with an Assegai on the front and a Minion DHR2 on the rear. Confirmed weight for our Merida e-One-Sixty test bike is 22.5 kilos, and as usual, that's without pedals and with the tyres set up tubeless. Out on the trail, and the new Merida e-One-Sixty carries over much of what we loved about its non-motorised counterpart. The suspension is plush, offering even greater reactivity here thanks to the improved sprung to unsprung mass ratio. There's loads of stability from the big fork and shock, which afford a really smooth ride quality that boosts confidence levels when you're hitting drops and launching into ugly rock gardens. Also appreciated is the lack of noise and vibration on the descents. The whole bike is quiet and nicely damped, with only the faintest rattle emanating from the Shimano motor. Now, this differs from Michael's recent experience with the same motor on the Santa Cruz Bullet, so perhaps we just got lucky with this particular drive unit, or the e-One-Sixty frame is just better at insulating that noise. The rib chainstay protector certainly dulls any slapping from the chain, and there's loads of armour along the down tube with a thick plastic skid plate underneath the motor. I'm also a big fan of the mullet setup, which provides a notable advantage when riding fast and twisty single track. Indeed, the e-One-Sixty is surprisingly agile given its abundant travel. Sure, it's no lightweight trail bike, but it tips in and out of sharp berms, unlike many other e-bikes in this category. Traction is plentiful thanks to the supple suspension and excellent tyre spec, allowing you to make the most of the enthusiastic handling. The thick casings and soft rubber contribute a lot to overall impact absorption, while also allowing you to commit to aggressive lean angles. Despite its sensitivity, however, the suspension doesn't completely melt underneath you when riding flowier trails. There's good feedback through the pedals, giving you a useful platform to push against and rewarding you when pumping the bike through rolling terrain. It takes to the air with ease, and should you misjudge the landing, there's plenty of travel to soak up your mistakes. All of this is to say that the e-One-Sixty isn't a total barge. Yes, it's plush and stable, and it loves to rumble descents flat out, but it's not a complete freight train like some others, particularly those that use dual 29-inch wheels like the Orbea Wild and the GasGas ECC6. Of course, you could slot in a 29-inch rear wheel if you were chasing further grip and stability. You could also extend the fork to 180mm, and there's always the option of fitting a coil shock if you wanted to turn it into a proper self-shuttling gravity rig. In terms of downsides, well, I've not been over the moon with Merida's new Team TR2 dropper post. This features 230mm of travel, though it's adjustable all the way down to just 30mm of travel to help you customize your saddle height. The mechanism is quite finicky, however, and with the travel reduced, the action of the post itself is pretty sluggish with no positive top-out noise. I also remain unconvinced by the headset cable routing, which isn't made any neater by the extra wires from the Shimano system and the Design headline. And while the e-160 is a really well-balanced e-bike, the burlier suspension and updated geometry place a stronger focus on descending stability compared to its predecessor. Now, I suspect that's what a lot of customers are looking for, but it has to be said that some of the pop and agility that we love so much about the previous version has been lost in the pursuit of more travel. Comparing the two bikes directly, the new e-160 has a longer rear center length and a longer wheelbase. This extends the gap between your hands and the rear axle, making for a longer lever to pull against when trying to lift up the front wheel. The Float X2 is more traction biased as well, strengthening the connection between the tyres and the ground. For a skinny-armed rider like me, that makes things a little bit harder when you want to fool around and work the terrain. The upside is that the new e-160 is a far more confidence-inspiring bike to ride when the trail gets rough and the speeds are high. It's plusher, grippier, and more stable overall, and compared to some of its peers, the e-160 remains one of the most fun and intuitive long-travel e-bikes I've ridden. I should also acknowledge that I've just come off the back of testing a string of sub-20 kilo e-bikes. In comparison, the extra mass and length of the e-160 makes it a little bit less playful overall. Speaking of lightweight e-bikes, I'm curious whether Merida is going to dip its toes into that category anytime soon. I'm also interested to see if it'll offer the shorter travel e-140 in a higher end spec. Currently, the e-140 is only produced with the heavier alloy frame and the bigger 750 watt-hour battery, but I think there's an opportunity to have a slightly shorter travel and lighter e-bike for riders who are less gravity focused. As for the Shimano EP8 motor, it's proven to be perky and powerful, offering greater support at lower cadences compared to the previous EP8 drive unit. That being said, I haven't found it to be quite as intuitive as the Bosch CX and SX motors I've been testing lately. It isn't as reactive to changes in cadence or input torque, with some occasional surging when I back off the pedals, or a touch of lag when I was trying to wind them up. Now, we're not talking a huge difference here, and within a few rides I had gotten used to it. There's also plenty of tuning options via the eTube app, including a fine-tune mode that gives you up to 15 levels of assistance. Pairing a bike to the app is still clunky though, and overall functionality is a bit limited compared to some of Shimano's competitors. And while the on-bike interface works well with tactile buttons and a vibrant display, it's not as tidy as the wireless setups we've seen from SRAM and Bosch. Annoyingly, the battery status is still displayed in just 5 bars. You don't even get a battery percentage in the app, which instead displays a tiny symbol with 10 difficult to read bars, and I think there's definitely room for improvement here. As for range, I've mostly been riding with the motor in the middle trail mode, which on flatter terrain has allowed me to ride up to 70 kilometers and with 1200 meters of elevation gain. On more technical test loops, my longest rides were a bit over 50 kilometers with around 1400 meters of climbing. I also put the e-160 through our standardized range test, setting the motor to its most powerful boost setting and racking up as many laps as I could before the battery ran flat. It ended up with over 2,000 meters of elevation gain, and if you're keen to see how that compares to the competition, I've put the full results into the full review over at flowmountainbike.com. Just click the link in the video description below if you're keen to check it out. Following that range test, I encountered an issue where the motor appeared to be stuck in an emergency eco mode with no clear reason as to why. Upon further diagnosis with Merida, the problem turned out to be with the Trend Power battery. This was replaced and the bike has been performing fine ever since. Of course, it was disappointing to experience on a bike that cost 16 grand. However, we're told that our test bike was a pre-production sample and the first to arrive in Australia, and therefore it should be an isolated incident. It's also reassuring to know that if a customer did happen to experience the same problem, it would be resolved within the warranty period. And that, folks, brings us to the verdict on the new Merida e-160. And with its new frame and suspension design, this remains as one of our favourite e-bikes on the market. The increased travel and updated kinematics have elevated its technical capabilities, offering more grip and stability when you're thumping across chunky terrain. It still handles like a champ thanks to its mullet setup and supportive suspension, and that makes it surprisingly versatile and fun to ride for such a long travel e-bike. Indeed, it's a confidence-inspiring bike whether you're a newer rider or someone who's looking to take it on the rowdiest Black Diamond single track. And considering there are 8 models across a broad range of price points, there's likely to be an e-160 model to suit most riders' budgets. Now, if you've got any questions for us about the new Merida e-160, make sure you drop those into the comments below. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time. Tooroo!